The times have changed, so has the delivery of news. We believe local news needs to be easily accessible. Hey, Owensboro, get with the times. Subscribe today at owensborotimes.com.
Hi, I'm Matt Castle with Castle Steel.
And I'm Daniel Dick with Daniel Dick State Farm.
And we're proud to partner with Owensboro Times.
It's never been more important than now to meet the candidates.
It's a vital part of our republic democracy for candidates to come forward and run for public office. I'm grateful for the individuals willing to run on the issues that are important to them and this community. Thank you for your willingness to serve the people of Owensboro.
Lastly, we want to thank you for joining us.
The town hall begins now.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Owensboro Times Primary Election Town Hall. I'm Jake Boswell. I'll be the moderator this evening, and first we'd like to explain the format to you, whether you're watching out here in the audience in person or if you're watching at home through streaming online. Candidates drew for their spot on the stage here upon arrival. We did that just a few minutes ago, and they were given topics ahead of tonight's forum, but have not seen specific questions. They'll be hearing them for the first time as you do in real time. Candidates are going to have 60 seconds to answer each of the questions, and the order in which candidates respond will alternate throughout. Each candidate will also be given 60 seconds to give a closing statement at the end of the forum. Now, the community's input was factored heavily as the group that put these questions together formed them to make sure that we address the most important topics to you. But guests will not be allowed here in the audience to ask candidates questions during the event. And guests, we're glad to have you here in attendance. Please hold your applause until the forum for this race for sheriff ends. In our ninth and final segment this evening, we're joined by two candidates for Davis County Sheriff. Let's introduce you to the candidates and let's get started with our forum. First, we have Brad Youngman and Barry G. Smith. Brad, as far as the draw went, you'll be asked the first question, and I'll give it to you right now. Do you agree with the perception that Davis County is no longer as safe a place to live as it used to be? Why or why not?
Yes, Jake. As a matter of fact, I do. There's a couple reasons that I would agree with that. One, I've seen it firsthand, answering calls, being involved in the operations of the police department and the Davis County Sheriff's Office and other entities. I've seen firsthand the types of calls we go on. I think there's a lot of factors that go into that, to include the amount of criminals that are back on the street quickly after they've been arrested and they reoffend. And then I would also point out that, for the last 6 months, everybody I've spoken to as I've been out campaigning has that perception also. So I think it would be pretty wise to agree with them. If that's how they feel, then that's pretty much what's going on, I would say. That's your ground intel,
Mr. Smith, same question to you. Do you agree the perception that Davis County is no longer as safe a place to live? Why or why not?
Yeah, I believe the perception is that, and it's rather obvious that the incidents that have occurred within the city of Owensboro with the gunfire incidents have made that perception, and it is to be real. There's no doubt that we've had a lot of gunfire incidents within the city of Owensboro. A lot of those are done by juveniles. We're fortunate outside the city of Owensboro, out in the county, that we haven't had those incidents bleed over into the county to that degree. But it is a concern. I think the Owensboro Police Department's done a great job at finding the perpetrators and arresting those perpetrators. And I think we have to continue to work with the court system, especially if those are juvenile offenders, to try to make sure that they're transformed and rehabilitated to where they don't come back and reoffend in such a manner.
Mr. Smith, you get to answer the second question first. How are the drug and crime issues of Davis County related, and what's your plan to attack both?
Well, I think a lot of the crime that's associated with the drug, the increase in drugs, if you want to say, is larcenies and some burglaries and so forth to try to provide money or ways and means to sustain the addictions. I think we've come a long way here in the last 6-8 months. with some of the drug interdiction. We were fortunate here in Davis County to be named to HIDA County, which is a task force that's associated with the Owensboro Police Department, the Davis County Sheriff's Department, Kentucky State Police, ATF, FBI, and Homeland Security. I think if you look back just last month, that team, along with all those entities I named heavily, were involved in a several-month investigation that resulted in 14 arrests of federal charges. I think the collaboration of all of the law enforcement that I named in this community is at its best in my 27 career to fight the drug problem.
Mr. Youngman, the same question to you. How are the drug and crime issues related in Davis County, and what's your plan to attack each?
Well, Owensboro and Davis County is like every community in this country. Unfortunately, drugs is a bad problem, and most of our crime stems from that, one way or another. There's no doubt that drugs are the worst we've ever seen, at least in the 20 years that I've been involved in law enforcement. And a big part of that is because the Davis County Sheriff's Office doesn't have a drug crime unit. As sheriff, I will start a full-time drug unit that focuses on Davis County's drug problem. There's no doubt that the HIDA is a great thing that Sheriff Kane started last September. And my question is, what else are we going to do? You know, the HIDA is a federal entity. Having one detective at the Davis County Sheriff's Office assigned to it is great, but they're going to focus on federal issues, and it may not even be in our community. We have a big local drug problem, and we need a local solution.
And now, Mr. Youngman, the next question to you is about mental health. It has a huge impact in our community. How do you plan to respond to community needs from a law enforcement standpoint when it comes to mental health?
Well, I would definitely say what crime is not directly related to drugs is in a lot of ways related to mental health. When I look at mental health and law enforcement, I look at two things. There's the services that we provide to the public, which mental health plays a big role. Fortunately, Kentucky has the CIT program, and all the local law enforcement agencies and pretty much statewide have all participated in that. We've seen tremendous success with that, where street and patrol detectives or deputies and officers have had a chance to spend more time with people that are affected by different disorders and find out what may be the root cause of what their behavior that's brought the police they're seeing. But also I look at the mental health of the employees of the agency, and that's a place that I think that most agencies need to do more work. Law enforcement is a very traumatic and very stressful job, and we have to do a better job of taking care of the people that work for us. There's programs available through the state that don't cost any money out of the budget that we could subscribe to make a bigger impact on our own employees.
Mr. Smith, with mental health having a huge impact on our community, how do you plan to respond to community needs from a law enforcement standpoint?
I've been fortunate to be on the River Valley Board for the last 2 years, and so I understand what services we have in this community. River Valley is a great organization, and I'm glad to be part of it, the services that we're providing with that agency. With that being said, all of our officers in their first year on the road go to CIT training, and that helps them deal with mental illness on the street and try to get those that are suffering from this disease, whether it be drug-related or not, some help. On the forefront, my opponent mentioned our employees. It is in the news about law enforcement and the mental health of law enforcement officers. I've reactivated our chaplains program. I've got 3 current chaplains that are participating in our office. And I've also sent some of our deputies to some conferences already in reference to mental health and suicide issues among law enforcement of my concern.
And Mr. Smith, the Owensboro Times has received multiple questions regarding a lack of transparency by the Davis County Sheriff's Office, specifically regarding the budget. What steps, if any, would you take to address that perception?
Our office is completely compliant in transparency and all the rules that follow with sheriff's offices over 70,000 in the state of Kentucky. We submit our budget to the Davis County Fiscal Court. It's signed and approved by the Fiscal Court. It's open to the public to review at any time. Our budget, our paperwork is not a line item budget, which I think is causing some confusion. The budget we prepare is a document that is required by the state of Kentucky and the auditors. It's a general term order. But transparency beyond the budget, I think anyone that wants to know to the penny of everything we take in, everything we disperse in taxes and fees, can look at the Kentucky State Auditor's website. We're audited every year on both of those, and it is very, very detailed, much better than any budget could be, because we all know budgets are just projections.
Mr. Youngman, I'll restate the question for you. The Owensboro Times has received multiple questions regarding a lack of transparency by the Davis County Sheriff's Office, specifically regarding the budget. What steps, if any, would you take to address that perception?
Well, I share those concerns. The first thing I would do, and I've made this a campaign promise from day one, is to post the budget online so the public can see it. Davis Countyans, like most Americans, are overtaxed, and they deserve that kind of transparency. They need to know where their money is going, what it's being spent on. This goes a long way to include building trust. If you look at the fiscal court's website, Davis County Sheriff's Office is the only one that's not listed there, and I think that is probably where a lot of those concerns are coming from. I don't think they're necessarily hiding anything, but I don't think it looks good. With regard to other transparency, you have to be more honest when talking with the public. And part of that would be not commenting so quickly on things. I know when I worked at the sheriff's office as a detective, we would be in the middle of a crime scene, and a lot of times there was this like zest to get a headline. And so a lot of times misinformation would be put out that we would have to later correct in court. So we would do a better job of controlling the flow of information to make sure it's accurate and timely.
Mr. Youngman, are there any steps that you would take to modernize or restructure the office if you were elected sheriff?
Yes, Jake, there is. I've said from the get-go that I think it's well past time that you're able to pay your taxes online the way you pay everything else. There are vendors out there that have that kind of product. We could subscribe to that. We can meet with them, come up with the best fit for our county. In addition, I've proposed the idea of being able to schedule a vehicle inspection online. That's a big part of what the office does. If you haven't bought a car from out of state, you probably don't know that. But there's not much parking downtown, and this would be a quality of life thing for people to be able to schedule those things, that they're not down there looking for a place to park, and then one of the vehicle inspection clerks has to go find their car, and it's just different things like that with the internet I think that we could use. I would also push for and create a more functional social media presence, not just Facebook and not just feel-good stories, but actual useful information that people would depend on. Crime alerts, traffic detours, we could tweet things like that out. We could have different pages and different ways to put better information out.
And Mr. Smith, the same question to you. Are there any steps that you would take to modernize or restructure the sheriff's office if elected?
We are working on the online taxes. We have been for the last couple of years since we transformed from an old system that we kept up with taxes and the county did away with. It's a little easier to say you're just going to do it and then flip a switch. We collect $68 million in taxes that the school system and health departments and fire departments and so forth depend on. So we want to ensure that, number one, some of the fees associated with this collection is not necessarily passed on to the taxpayer, but we also want to make sure that when we do roll this out here in the next couple of years, that it's bulletproof to a certain extent. Like I said, when you're audited and collecting and dispersing $68 million and you start an online system, you want to make sure that everything is done correctly. As far as vehicle inspections go, you can call in. We come to your house now. You don't have to make an appointment outside the courthouse.
Mr. Smith, this next question you'll be able to answer first. How will you work with the community to increase trust and respect in law enforcement by all members of Davis County, people who live here, specifically among teens and juveniles?
I think we live in a community that by far trust and support our law enforcement. When you watch the news, you see some communities that are suffering from that distrust and those defund the police. And I think we're fortunate to serve the public that does not adhere to that. And I think that goes back to what the law enforcement, the Davis County Sheriff's Office, the Owensboro Police Department, KSB, and all the entities that serve this community have done for so many years to garner that respect. As far as the roads and juveniles and young teens, I think we took a back step with COVID when people were at home, and we didn't get to go out and meet teens and other people at events. So I think we have to continue that, the community involvement and community policing to garner that trust back amongst the youth.
And Mr. Youngman, if elected, how will you work with the community to increase trust and respect in law enforcement by all members of the community, but maybe specifically teenagers and juveniles?
Sure. There is a anti-police fervor that's gripping this nation as a result of some of the events that have happened over the last few years. I think first and foremost, regardless of the age of the person that you're trying to garner that trust with and rebuild that trust, you have to have transparency like we talked about a moment ago, and you have to build that trust with everybody. You can't wait till you have a bad emergency like they did in Ferguson, Missouri, and then start trying to build relationships. You have to have those relationships in place first. Things I would do to create that with juveniles would be, as the head of the Davis County Public Schools Police Department, we have two missions: safety and building positive relationships. We recognize that at an early age, you have to build those relationships with juveniles so that they do trust you and they see you as someone that they can go to, even if they go home in the news and you're vilified by the media. With the adults, I think we need to have more opportunities to engage with them at different events. We need to look at things like Police Explore Post to where we can have juveniles come in and help us with things. We need to have a better internship program so that aspiring law enforcement and college students can come in and actually participate in a meaningful internship and not just sit around going ride-alongs all the time. That's it.
Well, thankfully, you guys have done a great job of staying on time for us. We can ask a few more questions than maybe we initially thought we were going to, so I appreciate you guys being respectful for that. Next question, and
Sure.
Mr. Youngman, you'll get to go first. While most people associated maybe a sheriff primarily with enforcing the law and public safety, the position is also an elected department and head administrator. What experience do you have regarding that aspect of the job?
Well, with my experience, I was a street supervisor at the Owensboro Police Department for several years. Worked alongside a lot of great, what I would consider great law enforcement leaders. Learned a lot of aspects of the different aspects of police work from them, to include administration. I'm also a retired Army officer. I think one thing that everybody would agree on is that the military provides, very valuable tools in leadership training, and that's why corporate America and so many civilian businesses like to hire veterans, because they seem to know things about leadership from an early age. My role in the military, I was a commander for almost half the time that I was commissioned. Prior to being commissioning, I was an enlisted soldier that rose to the rank of sergeant, so I was a mid-level junior manager. So I would bring those aspects to the job of sheriff as well.
And Mr. Smith, I'll ask you the same question. While most people do associate sheriff primarily with maybe executing law enforcement and public safety, the position is also an elected department. You'd be a head administrator. What experience do you have regarding that aspect of the job?
I've got 27 years experience with the Davis County Sheriff's Office, and you bring up a good point. The sheriff, in this particular county, we do provide 90% of the law enforcement outside the city limits of Owensboro. But as a sheriff, you're the constitutional officer of the courts. So you do a lot of duties that the courts have you do. Number one, we provide all the security for the judicial center, all the judges. We transport prisoners back and forth from the jail for their court hearings. We also have court orders to pick up prisoners all across the state of Kentucky and travel back and forth to and from the jail. We, as I said earlier, we collect $68 million in taxes that we have to do every year, and that continues to rise, that we have to account for. Most people don't know, but we are over about 50 estates that are court ordered, and if you've ever handled any estates, you have to understand the large task that is. So I'm well aware of all the constitutional duties of the sheriff, as I am the sheriff.
Mr. Smith, this question comes to you first. What internal policies do you plan to enforce or put in place to deal with potential indiscretions by members of your department?
Well, those policies are in place. We were accredited in 2015 and reaccredited in 2020. Those policies follow basically the Bill of Rights for police officers under certain circumstances. And the other investigations as far as policy violations are investigated by the command staff and followed through by policy guidelines. I think we adhere to those policies in great detail. There's been some confusion over the years of whether deputies follow under the Police Officer Bill of Rights, but recent court proceedings have stated that they do follow under the Police Officer Bill of Rights, mainly due to us participating in the CLEF program through the Department of Criminal Justice.
And Mr. Youngman, same thing to you. What internal policies do you plan to enforce or maybe put in place to deal with potential indiscretions by members of your department?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is start following the policies we have. The Davis County Sheriff's Office several years ago did undergo an accreditation process, and Major Bill Thompson was recognized as Deputy of the Year for all of his work that he put into that. He worked very hard on that, and I know firsthand from having worked there that it's not something that we follow very much. That leads to some issues within the department as far as trust and morale and things like that. I know my opponent was quoted in the Messenger Inquirer, and I'm not going to claim to know the exact quote, but he mentioned that when he was appointed sheriff, that he promoted 3 deputies to corporal, but that the other openings for promotion were not posted because they weren't open to everyone. I have the policy right here in front of me that says that all openings of assignments that come about the sheriff's office shall be announced agency-wide, and the positions will be filled through the selection process, and it goes on. Very clear on what you're supposed to do. They don't do that. So the first thing I think we'd have to start doing is just following the policies that we have.
And gentlemen, we've moved along now to our closing statement. You've done so well at time with this point. I want to give you guys as much time as you'd like for the closing statement. So you won't see the timer. We don't need the timer. But Mr. Youngman, I want to let you go first. This is your chance for a closing statement to the audience here in person and watching at home.
Well, Jake, thank you first of all for putting this on. Thank you, Owensboro Times. We appreciate the time. I know this is an important race, and we both have things that we want to say and do. I would just like to point out a few differences here. We've been at this for about 6 months now. My platform hasn't changed. I have a plan. It has a lot of details. It's been available the entire time for you to look at. There's things that I want to do, such as starting a drug crime investigations unit so that we can investigate our drug crime like I talked about earlier, hopefully get the drugs off the street. Drugs are the worst they've been in a long time in this county, probably worse they've ever been. You look at the overdose data. Overdoses are doubling almost annually. That's unacceptable. I don't know why we're sitting there. It's well past time to dedicate the resources necessary to make a difference in that fight. When you look at transparency, we have to do a better job of increasing the trust, not only with the fiscal court and the budget, but also with the taxpayers that are giving us the money. I'm the only candidate that's told you the plans that I have. I'm endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. I think they identify with the things that I want to do. And the discussions that we've had at the lodge over the last several years at the meetings, I've listened. I know what we need to do to increase morale. We have to reverse the exodus of officers and deputies that are leaving. I know why they're leaving. Close to 15 have left in the last 3 years, and that's unacceptable for an agency that size. We have to make changes. Again, I'll go back to a recent newspaper article. My opponent said there's not a morale problem. I learned as an Army leader, you always act like you have a morale problem. There's no other way to do it. If you act like you have a morale problem, then you're working to improve morale. Why would you not do that? And I'll just close by saying this. On May 17th, between now and May 17th, I'd appreciate your vote. I want to make a difference in the safety of our community for my children, your children, and their children so that they'll have a great community to raise their family in. And I fully intend to be the first elected Republican sheriff that we've had in a long time. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, your opportunity for a closing statement.
Sure. As your sheriff, I want to publicly thank the citizens of Owensboro, Davis County. I've had the pleasure of serving and wearing this specific uniform for the sheriff's office for the last 27 years. I appreciate your time this evening. I pledge to you that as your sheriff, my commitment to the service and integrity of your office remains paramount to me, just like I've ran my campaign with integrity. The law enforcement career field is most definitely a difficult occupation. However, many don the uniform and badge because it's a calling and a passion. You see, the great men and women that work tirelessly every day for your sheriff's office are to be commended for their service, and I'm blessed to be their sheriff, and I'm blessed to be your sheriff. As your sheriff, I promise to make you proud and ensure the Davis County Sheriff's Office continues to provide an unwavering professional service to you. As far as the transparency goes, we're subject to any kind of open records requests. If anyone wants to come and talk to me about anything with the Davis County Sheriff's Office, you can make an appointment or you can stop in. I have an open door policy. During this campaign, we've been subject to numerous open records requests, and we have submitted and responded with over 3,000 pages of documents that have been subject to open records. I don't have anything to hide at the Davis County Sheriff's Office, and you can just come on down and we'll talk about anything you want to talk about. As far as our staff goes, as I said earlier, I commend my staff. We are fully staffed as of today. We give a job offer today. I think things are looking great for the Davis County Sheriff's Office as we move out of COVID and get more recruits into the academy that's been behind for the last 6 months. And I thank you for your time tonight, and I hope to have your vote to remain as your sheriff for Barry Smith on May 17th.
That wraps up our final session of the day. Thanks to everybody who took the time to watch at home, and for everybody who came here, especially as late in the evening as it is. We appreciate you coming here to watch in person. We also want to thank the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum for allowing us to host the town hall here for hours and hours of setup and hours of having now 9 different races and candidates up here. It's been fantastic, so thank you to them. And thank you to our presenting sponsors, Castlin Steel and Daniel Dick State Farm Insurance Agent, and supporting sponsor, Mudd's Furniture. Also want to thank the staff of the Owensboro Times. They've been working behind the scenes here since very early this morning. They're all here still tonight. They'll be here long after most people are gone. They certainly need to be commended for their hard work and trying to make sure you watching at home are as informed as possible when you vote. Speaking of voting, there's one thing to watch this or to keep up with these races, but it's another to make sure that you actually execute and go out and exercise your right to vote. You can do that with early voting tomorrow morning. You can also do that on May 17th. That is primary election day. That does it for us this evening. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Thank you to the candidates for Davis County Sheriff.